Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Perlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Perlman.
Hello. I'm here on the Mediterranean Sea in Turkey along the Lycian Way. With me is Serra Summerson. She is an archaeologist and a licensed tour guide with Equinox Travel here in Turkey and also for the Ministry of Culture and Tourism for the Republic of Turkey. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
It's a great pleasure for us to have you here.
We're going to be talking about our adventures here in Turkey for the next half hour. But perhaps you could describe this particular area that we are in, because most people in America are very familiar with Istanbul or the Ephesus Greek ruins in Turkey or even Cappadocia. But we have been seeing hundreds of Greco-Roman ruins and ruins dating back more than 2,000 years along this way, seeing beautiful coastline. Where are we?
We are on the southern part of Turkey, on the Mediterranean coast. At the moment, we're within the province of Antalya, which is one of the largest cities of Turkey, with over 1 million population within the city itself, and over 2 million people living in the whole province.
Out of 70 million people in the country.
Even more than that now. The area where we are in at the moment is being advertised as the Lycian Way for tourism. This is ancient Lycia. We're standing on a peninsula here on the west of Antalya and on the east of the famous ancient Halicarnassus, which was the location of one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the mausoleum. So this beautiful peninsula that we are on now is ancient Lycia, and Lycia is a pre-Greek local indigenous civilization with its own culture, its own architecture. The topography of this peninsula, that is today known as the Teke Peninsula, the topography is very interesting, but at the same time it must have been very difficult for the ancient people who lived here. Therefore, these local Lycians created a very unique lifestyle, a very unique architecture, and a very unique culture. As the Lycian region was invaded over and over again by various civilizations coming from east, west, north, south, depending on the period, they continued to keep their culture and they continued to live in the way that they used to live in antiquity. And even today we still see the reflections of ancient architecture and ancient lifestyle, with the nomadic people who walk on the same paths that the ancient Lycians would have walked on, with the storehouses, the wooden storehouses that are very similar to those beautiful rock-cut tombs that we've been seeing throughout our journey. So this is a very unique, beautiful region where you can hike in the nature in beautiful pine and cedar forests up in the Taurus Mountains, where you can see beautiful Lycian, Greek, Roman period monuments, even later 5th, 6th century AD churches.
I'm seeing so much and enjoying it. And right behind you, I'm looking at Kakova Island, an uninhabited island in a beautiful harbor. And we can get to this beautiful tiny village, pension, all the modern amenities, but you have to take a boat or hike, even though along the Lycian Way there are very modern roads and accommodations. Staying here gives us a real sense of the ancient along with the modern.
Absolutely, that proves my point. We are at this site, at this beautiful little village of Kaleköy, known in antiquity as Simena, one other of the Lycian cities, a tiny little Lycian city. Simena is decorated with a beautiful, typical Lycian sarcophagi. It's decorated with that beautiful castle that was used for over 2,500 years. It's decorated with these beautiful stone houses, bougainvillea flowers coming out of everywhere, and the beautiful view in front of you, the noises of the boats, the fishermen's engines going.
And the fresh food that we can eat, it's grown locally, or the fish is definitely caught right here.
Absolutely. Behind us are flat lands, and in those flat lands there are several greenhouses. There is land for cows and sheep. There is land for goats. In the sea, lots of space for the delicious fish. All around us are these beautiful plants and lots of space behind this hilly area. So yes, the food that you eat is daily, it's local, and it's organic.
We've taken some hikes. After a little while, we discover another ruin. It seems continuous. Every valley, every hillside, every ridge, more tombs, more theaters of ancient past civilizations. You've been describing some of these ancient cities by the fact that they were very largely populated. The seats in the theater, 10% is what the population of the city was.
Yes, though this is for what we call the Roman period. The 1st and 2nd centuries AD was a golden age for the Mediterranean basin under the Roman domination. And the same thing carries on for this autonomical Lycian Union. It was a very special region. Even under the Roman Empire, the Lycians had a certain autonomy, had their own governors. So it is a very unique, it continued to be a very unique area, even in the Roman period when globalization was taken over. However, in that period, in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, throughout Anatolia and throughout Lycia, we see a golden age. The harbor cities grew and grew. Export and import became more and more, and it increased. So money came in, and the big cities started to grow even larger. So cities that we visited, like Myra, for example, was able to grow to almost 120,000 people. And the reason we know the population is not through an accurate census, but through the size of the theaters. In the Roman period, the architects write us that the general rule was that the theater should hold 10% of the population of the city. And therefore, if you find during excavations, if you are lucky enough to find an intact theater, and we are very lucky in that sense.
And they're open aired.
Absolutely, they're open air. If you are lucky enough to find an ancient theatre intact, of which we have many, you are able to multiply the capacity of that theatre by 10, and you get a general idea of what the population may have been.
What amazes me are the superb acoustics. These are stone seats, 30 tiers up, and yet at the top or to the bottom, you can hear without shouting. You don't need a microphone. They really knew how to create the best sound in these open air places. We've looked at cisterns where they have running water, even sewer systems going through the city. A lot of good facilities.
Yes, that is absolutely true. You know, sometimes we tend to think that an easy geography allows you to develop a civilization. However, there is a new theory and an ongoing theory, and my personal belief is that more difficult geographies push you to develop more and push you to create more. And therefore, yes, it is possible that in the difficult geographies where there were floods, like in Mesopotamia, like on the River Nile, where they had to calculate the floods, and in difficult geographies like here in Lycia, you had to work hard to find the correct positioning of an architectural building or for any other technological feature. And for the theatres in special, the general rule was that, especially in the pre-Roman period, the theatres were carved on to the side of a hill, and the seats, the blocks of stones, were placed on the small staired terraces that they created on the side of the hill. And the theatre, the cavea, the area where the spectators would sit, needed to overlook an open space so that the breeze could carry the voices up towards them. And at the same time, the way that the stones were carved, where the feet were located, there's a slight oval carving there on the seats, and that helps with the acoustics as well. Of course, the theatres always had a large stage building, which is something you don't see often, but in one ancient city here in Turkey, in the city of Aspendos, a perfectly preserved theatre shows you how the theatre's stage buildings were. So you had the front covered with a big wall, and that wall was always decorated, and therefore that helped with the acoustics, with keeping the voice inside the building.
While we've hiked through the forest and come across some ancient cities built in the Rocky Mountains, we've also hiked along the beaches and come to cities that were major for their port, for their harbor, for the trade activity. And yet some of these, because they're now ruins, the river has silted up and the port is a wetland, actually a great birding site. I've been seeing some wonderful birds.
Yes, that's true. Especially on the Aegean coast of Turkey, we see this even more. On the western part of the Mediterranean Sea as well, where the coastline becomes a bit rockier and scraggier. We have lots and lots and lots of rivers running down those beautiful Taurus mountains, which are snow-capped for over 7 months of the year, from end of October, beginning of November, all the way into the end of April. The Taurus mountains will be covered in snow. We also have lots of underground water. However, in the summer season, at the beginning of the summer, when the snow starts melting, the rivers become stronger and stronger, and the force of the rivers bring down a lot of soil from the mountains, and that soil collects in the narrow harbors. Because the coastline is so scraggy and zigzaggy, the harbors are rather narrow, and as the soil builds up and deposits itself there in the narrow harbors, the coastline changes. Every couple of centuries, the coastline of Western Turkey changes, and therefore the ancient cities were abandoned for having lost their harbor and their business, and that's why we see so many abandoned ancient cities with small villages maybe a couple of miles away from them.
I feel weather-wise and vegetation-wise as though I'm in my hometown of Los Angeles in Southern California. Now I understand where the phrase Southern California has a Mediterranean climate. That's what we have, the real one, right here. Beautiful weather all year round. Snow maybe in the mountains in the winter, but it's comfortable, it's pleasant, it's easy to travel all through the year.
That is true for the Mediterranean coast. Turkey is a very large country with very different geographical features in the west, north, south, east, center. However, yes, on the Mediterranean coast, we have nice sunny skies even in the winter. Possibly, if you're courageous enough, maybe even swimming weather. It might be a bit cold, but still it's manageable. The summers are hot, but they are very enjoyable for people who miss the sun, who come from the colder places. And the springs and autumns over 7-8 months of the year are absolutely breathtaking.
There's so many breathtaking views every time we turn a corner, whether or not we're driving in a 4x4 or along the highway or hiking. I just get overwhelmed by the gorgeous beauty of the coastline, of the sea, of the mountains. And we're going to talk more about this area and the Lycian Way adventure with my guest, Serra Somerson, with Equinox Travel when we return in a moment.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Perlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Serra Somerson, who is an archaeologist and a licensed tour guide with Equinox Travel here in Turkey and also with the Ministry of Culture and Tourism for the Republic of Turkey. We are focused on my adventure in the Lycian Way. Who exactly were the Lycians?
The Lycians, or the Lycians, will become more popular in time due to their unique architecture and due to their very interesting geography. However, for the time being, maybe people don't recognize this word yet. Just to give you an insight to who these Lycians were. Lycia actually was mentioned by the Hittites. The Hittites are a Bronze Age civilization living in central Turkey. They spoke an Indo-European language, and they had dominated or colonized most of the coastline of Anatolia. In the Hittite archives are some very, very interesting documents. The Hittites wrote about everything from laws to lists and lists of thousands of gods from the places that they had conquered or dominated. However, the Hittites are most famous for a written treaty that they had signed with the Egyptians, the Kadesh Treaty. Today, it's the earliest known written treaty of history, signed between the Hittites and the Egyptians. And guess who was fighting with the Hittites? The Lucca people. And they were the Lycians. A replica of this written treaty, the Kadesh Treaty, stands in front of the New York United Nations building.
I am just amazed by the bits of history at every point, every place we stop. And we saw some natural flames coming out of the ground. They're 24 hours, as in any case, there's a lot of mythology. But I read a sign that said that this is where the eternal flame for the Olympic Games originally came from.
That is true. Well, we don't know if that was true, but it's true that we have many, many, many myths that are rooted here in this land that in antiquity was called Anatolia. Today we know it as Turkey. Going back to the well-known myths of the Lycians, in the Iliad written by Homer, the Trojan War is mentioned. Only 10 days of it maybe was written down in the book of Iliad. Only that part of it has been preserved to our day. However, it's interesting to see that when the Mycenaeans were trying to conquer Troy, the Trojans had help of local kings behind them in the hinterland of Troy, which is in the northern part of the Aegean Sea in Turkey. And one of the peoples who was helping the Trojans was, of course, the Lucca people, the Lycians again. So even in the most famous books on Greek mythology, like the Iliad, we can read about these local Lycians who we are getting to know more and more these days, and many, many other myths, such as the one you just mentioned about the flames.
So what is the mythology about Santa Claus and St. Nicholas? Because I saw his church and I'm not in the North Pole.
No, you are not. Saint Nicholas was a saint who lived in the 4th century AD. He was a real person. We know this because we have writings about him. We have registrations about him being the bishop of the Church of Myra. He was also present at the Nicene Council held in 325, where many, many important basic features of Christianity was decided upon. Saint Nicholas was a saint, and in his time he is said to have created some miracles. He was a very significant person for Myra and its surroundings, for Lycia as well. He loved helping people, he loved helping children especially. However, when Saint Nicholas, as a Christian saint, reached the United States with so many other mixed cultures from Scandinavia, the Anglo-Saxons, the Germanics, all those interesting features of a man who loved children, who wanted to help them, got a little bit mixed up, and certain commercial adverts created this nice, very huggable big man with a lovely white beard, a very fatherly figure who helped children. Why not turn him into a figure that is adaptable to Christianity at the same time? Sinterklaas was the Scandinavian name. Santa Claus is the American name, but Saint Nicholas is the real name.
This is what I love so much about traveling and seeing new places, meeting people, hearing about the legends, the history, because you get a sense of history, you get a sense of how culture evolved and how myths and stories have moved about from one place to another. There's so much here. Every place we turn, there seems to be an ancient ruin. Every place we go, there seems to be something that is in Western civilization, based here in Turkey. Really, ancient Greece was pretty much headquartered here in Turkey, from what I can gather.
Yes, not to offend anyone, but this is a fact. There are more ancient Greek settlements in Turkey than there are in Greece. And there are more ancient Roman ruins here in Turkey than there are in Italy. This is a fact. Turkey is a large country, and we can't help if we have these marvelous places to visit. Yes, Anatolia, as the Greeks called it, the country where the sun rises from. The Greeks learned a lot from their eastern neighbors, especially from the local small indigenous kingdoms and cultures such as the Lycians or the Trojans. But they also learned a lot from Egypt, from Mesopotamia. And we always have to remember that culture doesn't spring up in the 6th century BC one day. It's an accumulation of culture and history and knowledge and calculations and mathematics and philosophy that goes back millennia before the Greek culture ever was known.
But we can create our own modern adventures, and I've had so much fun hiking through the cedar forest, the pine forest, just seeing some wildlife, seeing the scenery, the views of the Mediterranean Sea, of the cliffs, of the mountains. Your Equinox travel provides everything from boat trips to 4x4s to hiking, and you're adaptable and flexible depending on how far people want to hike, just a short half-mile walk or a 2, 3, 4-mile hike. Even harder, you'll provide all the amenities, and then we always stay at these charming, beautiful pensions, very first-class accommodations with delicious food. You must tell me, because you have ordered for us a different meal for lunch and dinner, and I didn't know there was such a variety, and it's all local and organic and natural.
Yes, that's true. As a philosophy for me personally, and a philosophy of Equinox Travels, is that the people who want to come here to have a good time. So we will tailor the tours to their likings, to their abilities, to their needs. If they are historians or very interested in history, we will create a tour that will give them the maximum possible amount of ancient sites within the limited time that they have. If they're more interested in hiking, we'll give them the maximum amount of hiking trails that they can do within their abilities. If they're more interested in adventurous excitements such as 4x4 vehicle adventures in the Taurus Mountains, rafting, canoeing, kayaking, we'll provide that. And if it's just a person who wants to get a little bit of a taste of everything, we are able to provide that too. Luxurious golette boats that travel within the Bay of Kekova are also available, or daily boat trips too, for those who want to have only a day or two on a boat just to see a little bit of the coastline. But also our philosophy is that for us, yes, this is a job, but it's also a dream. So as we're providing the people who want to come and visit Turkey their tours, we want them to have the utmost pleasure by eating the best foods, by staying in the most charming villages. Yes, we have big tourist resorts here in Turkey as well, on long sandy beaches, but you know, people who want to go there, can go to places like that in other countries as well. This is what makes Turkey special. A little hike, a little castle, a little charming village, bougainvillea dangling down the walls, wonderful daily, local, fresh food. This is what Turkey is about.
And the food is great for vegans and vegetarians. You have fresh vegetables, and the variety of olives has been so delicious. You have eggplant dishes, you have yogurt dishes, you have kebabs, various meat dishes, and the fresh fish, of course.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Turkish cuisine isn't very well publicized or very well known throughout the world. When you say Turkish food, everybody thinks of kebabs. And kebabs, by the way, is a general term for 80 different plates, 80 different dishes. Yeah.
Basically meats on a skewer that are grilled.
Not only that, a kebab can be cooked in a jar in an oven, and in many other ways as well. It can be made out of just vegetables, beef, lamb, chicken. But kebabs, the 80 different types of kebabs, are only one part of our cuisine. due to our great big land and our different geographies, our different topographies, it's obvious that we're not going to have the same food eaten all throughout Turkey. And with today's possibilities, all the different plants and all the different meats that are produced in different parts of Turkey can travel. However, in places like the Mediterranean coast and in the hinterland, which is a very fertile land, it's very easy to produce good quality vegetables. So those travelers who are after vegetarian dishes as they're coming to Turkey, they may worry about what they're going to eat, but they are going to be in heaven.
They don't have to worry. Every meal has fresh tomatoes and cucumbers and onions and parsley and other wonderful vegetables. The appetizers alone, to me, are a meal, and yet the food keeps coming. It's generous. And the breads are really, really delicious. Everything. I'm thoroughly enjoying getting fresh orange juice. I see it being squeezed. And pomegranate juice, fresh.
Yes, absolutely. We are in the orange land of Turkey, where we are now, close to the city of Finike, which has its own microclimate, has the best oranges of Turkey. So almost throughout the year you can find fresh oranges. In today's world, obviously, we have the big cold storehouses where some of the oranges are kept. But some people still carry on doing the old tradition. They pick the oranges here and they send them to Cappadocia. And in Cappadocia, in those underground tunnels, in those underground caves, the oranges are kept throughout the summer so that they are fresh, juicy, and tasty when they are needed at the end of the summer.
There's so much to see and do and so much to eat and enjoy. I wish we had time to talk about our whole trip. We've only touched upon a few of the ruins that we have seen. We've only touched upon a bit of the natural geography. Tell me more about your favorite places here along the Lycian Way and what I should see when I return.
My personal favorite place actually is where we're standing right now. Behind me is the island of Kekova, this beautiful straight-like body of sea. We're sitting in a beautiful stone house on a beautiful terrace, and the greenery and the flowers to me just make it perfect, and no traffic sound, no engines going.
Oh, we have the boats.
The anchors and the engines of the boats, absolutely, but no traffic, no pollution. This is, for me, the best.
In fact, I've been swimming in the Mediterranean Sea. It's so clear, it's unpolluted, and I was amazed at the fact that it was salty enough for me to float.
Yeah, the Mediterranean Sea is very salty, 2.7 is its percentage.
So it's fun swimming, it's fun walking around. The people are so hospitable and friendly and helpful. This makes a very easy, pleasurable trip to be able to come to Turkey. Now, what should I see next time?
Well, if you've enjoyed the Mediterranean coast so much, why don't you try the Black Sea coast? The Eastern Black Sea is a place to discover. It fits your likes very much. Ecotourism, eco-travel. The Black Sea region is almost under cloud and rain for 300 days. It's a little green gem, and it's a beautiful place to discover. It's a newly discovered place.
Going through these ruins dating back over 2,500 years, from the Lycian period to the Greco-Roman period and the Byzantine period, has really given me a sense of history in place. I get a better understanding. But with you as an educated professional archaeologist, you have provided detail that I wouldn't see if I just came on my own and looked at some rock structures. I want to thank you so very much for providing the detail that makes it much more informative and much more interesting to understand these ruins. What do you find the tourists enjoy the most about looking at these places?
Every person has their own likes and own hobbies, maybe. However, one of the most exciting things for me, especially as an archaeologist and a nature lover, is to be able to do a magnificent hike through forests and different terrains, rocky terrains, flat terrains, and seeing beautiful trees and various endemic plants, especially in the spring. The flowers just spring up as they should do in spring. It's magnificent just to suddenly bump into ancient ruins, a rock-cut tomb or a theatre or something that the person who's following me is not expecting. And sometimes I do try to create a surprise for them. I sometimes don't even mention that they're about to see a rock-cut tomb ahead of them or some ancient ruins. So it is a true surprise, and I think that is the most important feature of this region of Lycia.
I look forward to coming back. I want to thank you so very much for making this trip so enjoyable and fantastic. Thank you very much for being my guest.
It was my pleasure.
I have been speaking with Serra Summerson, who is an archaeologist and a licensed tour guide with Equinox Travel here in Turkey and with the Ministry of Culture and Tourism for the Republic of Turkey. I'm Nancy Perlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host Nancy Perlman is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.